Outriders is just a interesting kind of game. I have a crazy love-hate relationship with it, but this DLC is really where I've hit my breaking point. I was excited for Outriders. I'm no stranger to looter shooters. I have the patience for grindy games. I love the feeling of making my character completely unstoppable. Outriders promised this, and I was completely on board. Third-person Destiny? Sign me up. Cue the game release, where a game I was fully prepared to pay retail for ends up on Gamepass. I saved myself the money, hop on, and really enjoy the campaign with friends. The story wasn't very good. The voice acting sounded like they picked up people from a local coffee shop.
Son of a bitch! These ice storms are getting more insane every day. Edie, thought you said these pods were protected.
No! I have to pull this data before.
Jana, do you copy? Jana? Tiago? Bailey? Shit. Zaidi, stay with the pod. Something's wrong. Like this.
I could barely tell you what really happened in the game besides me killing everything. There's an annoying enemy that carries a gun that sounds like popcorn popping, but overall, I had fun. Everyone falls off the game and moves on to the next thing, but I wanted to get a little stronger because killing mobs of enemies was just a blast with the trickster build I picked out. I get to endgame, figure out that I can't hang, find a grind spot, and mindlessly grind tiers to get to a higher level. I get to challenge tier 8 on my own before giving up. My gear was getting nerfed in a PvE game for some reason, and it just felt like I hit a wall. I could only progress in the game by getting legendary drops, which were really hard to get at the time, and the only guaranteed way was to repeat a Monster Hunter mission over and over and over again, hoping I'd get that legendary just to put on those mods and go through those last drop pod tiers. I stopped playing the game up until this Worldslayer expansion. The DLC exposed me to honestly just the fraud of a game Outriders was, and just how this Gamepass effect clouded my judgment to a game that really doesn't know what it wants to be. Worldslayer is a $40 DLC with about 3 to 5 hours of content for I would say most people. The price is ridiculously steep for just the bullshit that it promises. You're not getting a new character class, you're not getting a subclass or an awesome expansion, you're just getting more Outriders missions. The missions are literally blast everything up until you get to a sponge boss. Fight the boss while fighting hundreds of other things at the same time. There's no new enemies, there's new boss types, but you're just gonna get killed by the same things that you saw in the original game. World tiers are just traded out here for apocalypse tiers. Basically the same thing. These will help you raise your character even farther in level. These apocalypse tiers though are just as broken as the world tiers before it. You can't play at the highest tier because the enemies are at your level, or even a level or two higher, you're just completely fucked. I then remembered that to beat the game, I'm gonna have to play on a low tier, especially if I'm playing solo. I couldn't convince anyone to buy the game here with me. No one really wanted to drop $40 on this DLC, but I just had to see what it was about. I ended up playing the game on tier 3, and I got zero good loot. I upgraded my PAX points, PAX or PAX or whatever that is, to help diversify my build. This was something new that they added, which was basically just upgrading your guy even further. I followed some builds online for the most OP thing, just to help, make it less hell. People were already coming up with what was OP, and I basically just grinded it out to the end game. This time around, it felt even more shallow and lifeless. Endgame was where the disappointment really just climaxed. I had fun at first. I mean, I built a brand new pyromancer this time around, but it really just felt like playing solo was impossible. I ran the endgame dungeon, which was supposed to provide hundreds of hours of content, maybe about 4 times, and then I just gave up. I haven't touched it since. The endgame doesn't change. You've got the same dungeon that you're just forced to repeat over and over again. Within that dungeon, there are 2 bosses that repeat. The bosses are going to drop legendary gear, guaranteed, which is great, and the fact that you can even select it is even better, but I haven't even gotten to the full amount of fuckery they decide to provide in the game. Your legendary gear is always going to drop at what your apocalypse tier is. meaning you need to grind the story or dungeon and raise your apocalypse tier, aka find, a grind spot on YouTube, kill the same thing over and over and over and over again, and raise your apocalypse tier. If you get any new fancy legendary armor and guns, great, but guess what? If you level up past that, you're going to need an insane amount of crafting material to upgrade them just to get to your current level. Endgame trials here are nowhere near as varied as the drop pod missions of the original game. That at least has different areas, locales, and yeah, you're fighting your way to a drop pod, but it's something different. There's different monsters to fight. This is literally a dungeon that's static, which if you're under leveled is insanely hard alone, by the way. Enemies in the game are thrown at you with such crazy ferocity, it just feels like you need 2 or 3 other bodies to get shot at, because they're all just gonna laser you. Snipers don't miss at all, and when you're trying to get to them, you have guys trying to stab you, you got people shooting at you, you've got grenades being thrown at you, creatures that are just dive bombing you. It feels like the devs here, instead of crafting a level, just threw everything they had and counted on there to be more players and firepower. I mean, the way the game works is that you heal when you kill something, and if you're not just farming up all the really low enemies, or if you're not able to kill things, good luck, you're not getting through. The A button for cover system or whatever that is, whatever console you're using, it's worthless. You're rarely going to be using cover. The whole point of cover system just feels like it was something that they threw in, but I mean, again, it feels like they don't know what they wanted the game to be. Worldslayer here suffers from what I call the Gamepass effect. The lifeless grind wasn't that bad when I got the game for essentially free. I know I'm paying 15 bucks a month or 10 bucks a month or whatever, but it's nice to have a $50, $60 game drop and basically pay for my entire year. But after I dropped $40 on just this little content, I felt burned. I wasn't that big of a fan as I had thought. The main issues with the game aren't fixed. This is literally just more of the same. To even offer an endgame dungeon that's static instead of some kind of roguelike, which is what I thought it would be, going into it, it doesn't make any sense. It feels lazy. If the dungeon would change, it would have been at least more interesting, it would have been more fun to play through, and I probably would have done it more than 4 times. I just can't justify grinding the same missions to raise my apocalypse tier, only to have to grind the dungeon to get the loot I want. There's not enough to do in the game, and the shine here really wore off. They added new missions, an endgame dungeon, more tiers, and new legendary gear with a 3rd armor mod, right, or mod or whatever to the gun, that you really don't see unless you really grind, because I was getting old legendaries, for majority of the time until the endgame. All this was for $40. I can't help but really give this a 5 out of 10. And the only reason it's even that high is because the DLC isn't really aimed at people like me. It's aimed at the diehards that never stop playing this. If you enjoy this type of style game, and you completely finish the last one and you're itching to grind this game, maybe this DLC is perfect for you. That's where, I guess it's a 5 out of 10 or maybe even higher for those people. I personally really wanted to give it a 4, but, realized while I was playing it that I'm not the target audience for this. If you're like me and you're hoping the game got better, or if the developers learned from their first mistakes, they didn't. The game is just a cycle of grinding to overlevel your surroundings when solo, especially solo, because you stand no chance against the enemies, which is how much they throw at you. If you're even the same level here, it's just completely unfair. You need to be a higher level to get through. I seriously didn't mean to rant so hard on this. I just had to let my opinion be heard. I liked Outriders, and I really hoped the DLC would bring new life to the game for me. I can only hope that this eventual sequel that's going to come out is going to build on this, right? And make it better. And hopefully the developers take a really hard look at what they want this game to be. Repeating the same missions to raise your tiers, only to have to grind more to get your guns to and past your level, is ridiculous. Let alone hoping you get the right mods. Lowering your apocalypse tier to 3 or 4, whatever works for you, is boring. You're just going through hordes of enemies. The grind is not enjoyable at all. And selecting an early game mission where everyone's grinding out apocalypse tiers and just mindlessly holding the right trigger to just destroy these little mobs of enemies just to level up your guy is just ridiculous. It's not fun. Other looters have done a way better job of just rewarding players for playing. You know, having a guaranteed drop, missions that'll guarantee legendaries, events that are rewarding players. There's just variety there. If you're looking for a reason to get back into Outriders, Worldslayer really isn't it, and I strongly suggest you save your money for a sale or just skip this one out entirely. Well, that's it guys, that's it for my thoughts here on the DLC. This one was, I mean, a little bit shorter than my other videos, but I mean the game's 3 hours, 4 hours long. I beat it in a day and a half. I just really needed to get my thoughts out on how I felt about this. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.